Good evening. My name is John Elson. I teach high school math here. My students know me as Mr. Elson. Tonight, I have the privilege of introducing our mystery speaker. I have known this person for over 3 decades. Currently a teacher at Valley Christian School, this individual has also taught composition and literature courses at the Ohio State University and the University of Montana. In 2001, they became a reader and table leader of the AP English Language and Composition exams. Since 2001, they have served as a faculty consultant for the College Board, presenting one-day workshops and week-long institutes in places such as Fairbanks, Alaska, Honolulu, Stanford University, Brooklyn, New York, and dozens of high schools and universities across the United States. In addition to teaching and course content writing for the college-level American literature courses, they read and serve as a scoring leader for the writing sample of the SAT. In their spare time, they teach online for UCLA in the summer sessions. As a mentor teacher, their joy is in helping teachers and students discover new insights in the language arts. I personally have had the privilege of not only taking their classes, but also have been discipled and disciplined by this individual. There has been some confusion over the years of my relationship with this person, highlighted by a recent trip to Chicago with them. As the gate agent in Chicago for Delta Airlines scanned our boarding passes, they forgot to hand us our tickets for the next leg of the journey back to Missoula, and made a comment that could have been bad, as we would have ended up back in Chicago. To which my traveling partner said, "Oh, that's okay. Our grandchildren live here." The agent's eyes opened wide. She tilted her head sideways with a look of amazement, staring at us. As we walked down the corridor, I thought, something's wrong. I quickly shouted back at her, "Oh no, her grandchildren live here. She's my mom." To which my mother replied, "We're not those type of people." A look of relief swept over the agent's face. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the mystery speaker, my mom, Mrs. Carol Elson.
One life, one voice. This evening, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is you are alive. The bad news is you will soon be gone. This truth is all the more poignant in that we received news just moments ago that one of John's closest friends, Keith Kreiner, suddenly passed away. The shock of this emphasizes the fact that each of us will soon be gone. It seems the older I get, the deeper this truth sinks in. When you think of the future, what do you see? Years of working and enjoying family and friends, planning for an endless succession of days stretching on and on and on? When you look at the past, what do you see? A glimpse of memories, fast receding in the distance against a background of forgetfulness? Gone in a moment, a mist. We deceive ourselves, living as if our lives go on forever, and we busy ourselves making plans and provisions for endless days. But God tells us in James, no, your life is but a vapor. Your story will have an ending, and when the book of your life is read, it will read like a brief drama. It seems that lately I have been attending funerals of godly individuals such as Roy Owens, Earl Reimer, Karen Lotzenheiser, and Pete Wilson, my husband's amazing godly wrestling coach at Wheaton College. And now the nation is humbled as we honor the 99 faithful years of God's servant, Billy Graham. When I listen to the recitals of their lives, their service to people and to their God, Tears come to my eyes as the thought occurs to me, I have wasted so much time. God warns us in his word to avoid this terrible habit of drifting along, assuming we have all the time in the world to waste and choose and use as we choose. He tells us that we are his people only if we abide in him continually, not off again, on again, in occasional moments of remembering. Nowhere is this more clearly spoken than in God's requirements for parents in Deuteronomy chapter 11. God details the wonders of his love, his provision for us, his miracles, his truth. And then he commands us, teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. I challenge each of us to assess the last 48 hours or even the last week. What percentage of that time did we spend teaching, talking, sitting, walking, lying down, and getting up all about Jesus Christ and his wonderful ways? If you were like me, I would guess that percentage is lower than we would like to think about. And then we begin to wince at the thought of the minutes and hours that our children's ears are filled with the silly and ungodly and often corrupting voices of television, music, movies, or video games. I grew up in a Christian home, but it wasn't perfect. My dad was a pastor, and he also struggled as an alcoholic. As I went from middle school to high school, my parents were distracted by their own troubles, and school became the center of my world. A particular teacher took a special interest in some of us who excelled in his classes. He took us to the symphony, to elite restaurants, to the theater, but mostly he cared about us. His voice was a powerful force in shaping who I became as I entered college. He was an atheist, an intellectual. He admired the German philosophers. He was brilliant. He loved the arts. He scoffed at religion. He loved us. I responded to that voice and spent my years in college and graduate school living under that influence and the many voices of the counterculture of the 60s that enhanced that voice. It was Satan's free ticket to ride down the Broadway path to destruction. The dark explosion of rock music, psychedelics, Eastern religions, hitchhiking for a year in South America, all this was a parallel track to my very successful academic career. In the poetry world, I hobnobbed with Pulitzer Prize-winning poets, all as desperately lost as myself. In the final stages of finishing my PhD, I went to a poetry conference with one of these poets at a camp high in the mountains of Colorado, where God's voice broke into the din of my mixed-up world in the person of a refrigerator repairman who had come to repair the camp refrigerator. This repairman, Ray Johnson from Ray's Fix-It, asked me, "What about these mountains? Did they just happen, or were they created?" That question instantly telescoped 24 years through my past back to my mother's voice, reading Uncle Arthur bedtime Bible stories to me when I was 3 or 4 years old. As the conversation went on, I fell under deep conviction and sought God for many months. Praise him for his mercies. He delivered me from the terror of the darkness and transferred me to his kingdom of light through the blood of the Lamb. God brought me to Missoula. I married Andy, and soon we had 4 precious children to raise in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. The recent horror of my past made me earnestly desire that above all else our children hear the voice of God and follow him. Even though homeschooling was in the pioneer stages of our culture and looked upon with suspicion, we chose to homeschool our children because we didn't want them to be influenced by the distracting voices of teachers who did not know Jesus. When a door opened for me to teach at Valley Christian and enroll our children here, I remember sobbing through my interview in Earl's office, hardly able to speak. He asked me why I was crying, and I blubbered out, "You love Jesus." He looked at me quizzically and finished the interview as best he could. He was probably thinking of his own black heart, humble man that he was. But I walked out of that office so grateful for the one voice vision at Valley, where the investment we had made in our children's hearts would be reinforced in their school. Whatever time we had spent teaching, talking, sitting, walking, lying down, and getting up all about Jesus Christ and his wonderful ways would now be continued in their academic world. We've never regretted investing in Valley. Our children have thanked us for sending them to Valley Christian School and continue to do so as adults, as they are, some of them, facing the challenge of raising their own children. In fact, one of our children has gone before us to heaven, and in the last months of her life, planned for the Anna Blaylock Memorial Scholarship Fund to be established at her passing in order to enable others to have the privilege, as she did, of attending a God-honoring school. Our lives are short, a mist, a vapor. Let's encourage one another as parents to turn from our distractions and respond to the high calling of God in Christ Jesus and do everything possible while our children are under our care to ensure their ears and their hearts are filled with teaching, talking, sitting, walking, lying down, and getting up, all about Jesus Christ and his wonderful ways, so that one day we can walk with them out of this mist into the rock-solid eternal life with him forever.
Good evening. I'm Shannon Painter, and I'm the Director of Development here at Valley Christian. And I was asked to give you permission to start eating your dessert if you haven't already, except for my table, because I want to make sure there's some left when I get back. I was introduced to this school a little over 21 years ago when my family moved to Missoula. My first Faith Challenge event would have been in the spring of 1997. As a freshman at that time, I got the wonderful honor of helping with the dishes. So if any of you need help cleaning up tonight, just find a freshman and tell them it's protocol. I graduated a couple of years later with the largest, best looking, and most talented class of 2000. Best looking, obviously, because Mr. John Nelson was in my class. I should have said most entertaining, John. When Jesus is in your class, no one else can really compete. And most talented because Mrs. Erin Sepp Hansen was also in my class. Erin is one of my 5th grade son's teachers, and when I asked him what he liked best about her, he said, "She's so smart and she knows lots of big words." My husband and I currently have 3 of our 4 children attending school here. Our youngest is only 2, but will be a Lady Eagle someday as well, Lord willing. My journey of returning to the school as a parent has been one of faith, stretching, sacrifice, and God's miraculous provision. If you would have told me, it's Mrs. Olson's fault for crying first. If you would have told me 9 years ago when I, as a single mom, enrolled my oldest son, Tyler, in kindergarten, that he would still be here as an 8th grader, I would have been overwhelmed with gratitude, as I am right now. What a testament to God's goodness. and to the willingness of others to sacrifice their resources so kids like mine could be here. Standing here now as a school employee has also been a journey of faith, stretching, and sacrifice. I was not looking for a job when this position came open. I knew not taking this job would have been much easier, especially because I prefer sweatpants. That's frowned upon here. But I'm here today for a variety of reasons. One, because I believe it was where God was leading, even though there have been times when I didn't want to go along. I'm also still here in part because I want to help enable not only my children, but as many other children as I can to be able to attend here. One of the funny things about being on staff is that when your child gets in trouble, you hear about it a lot faster because you see their teachers in the hallway. Just last week, I got called into Mr. E's office because one of my children had gotten into a little bit of trouble, but I left feeling encouraged and hopeful, not discouraged. Mr. E had told my son the very same thing that I had just told him the day before. This is the one voice model. The discipleship process of our children is much more simple when teachers and administrators are saying the same things to our children that my husband and I are. This is worth sacrificing for. Finally, I'm here because of the school community. I can stand up here tonight and see people that I've known and loved for 20 years. People that have had an incredible impact on my life. I see teachers that shaped the way I learned to communicate and defend my faith, like Mrs. Elson and Mr. Norberg. Teachers that helped me discover my love for music and taught me how to drive, like Mr. Reimer, who only had to step on the chicken brake once or twice. I see women I played basketball with who befriended me when I was a new kid and I didn't know anybody. And I see dear friends, some that I've known since day one, like Carmela and Michelle, and some that have come into my life more recently, like Laura and Ashley and Erica, who drove my kids home every day for a whole year when I was in a really tough season of life. Those are the kind of people that you want to do life with, and I'm so grateful for this community. It's family. I want to introduce you now to someone who is a newer part of our school family. His wife sits in our north office and answers the phone with one hand while typing with her feet and holding Kleenex on bloody noses with the other hand. I've seen it. If you ever want to see a real Wonder Woman, just come sit in the office for a little while and watch Brianna multitask with the most incredible measure of patience. Jayton, you married well. Jayton is hard to miss around campus as a former Grizz tight end. Sorry, I said I was going to cross that out of my notes. But only wanted me to introduce him as a proud and thankful parent of a first grader here. Jayton.
Try to keep it together, but thank you very much for having me up here as a proud parent. I definitely married well. She is amazing, not only here, but at home as well. A phenomenal mom. And we are proud parents. We did not know that we could even have this opportunity to have our child attend a school like this. And when I say a school like this, I'll even read the mission statement. Valley Christian School exists to partner with Christian families who desire educational excellence taught through a biblical worldview so their children will be prepared for a lifetime of authentic faithfulness to Jesus Christ. My heart's racing just reading that and knowing that we get to have a daughter be a part of something like that. I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. Yeah, it's amazing because both of our backgrounds, Brianna's background and mine, it wasn't in the plan for us. And you know, Shannon said, we're new here. And having this opportunity, you can't compare it to anything. Jaslyn comes home and she's singing this song. What song are you singing? Self-control. You can't help but sing along with it. And it's only really funny because that's what we teach her at home. You have to have that self-control. You have to have, and you know, we call it many different names as well, but mind control is another thing that we call it. Being tough, persevering, having that awareness. And these are just things that we teach at home just on our own. And then when she comes home singing a song like that, you know your child is having that one voice motto. And when you hear that one voice motto, you think at first it's a catchphrase, it's something you can hang your hat on, it's something that you can just write down and show that you're doing something about it. But it really is, it really is working. And that's what weighed on my heart on the drive over. It's, wow, it really is working. You know, Earl Reimer, like his vision, it's working. The mission statement, it's working. The Faith Challenge celebration. We are here to celebrate. I want to clap for that. This is a celebration, and I want us all to remember that. I want to let you know I am here to celebrate with every one of you who have attended this school, who have supported this school, who will be supporting this school. It's working, and I can't be more thankful. I can't be more happy about it. I know my daughter's happy about it. The influence goes all the way from the time we wake up and thank God for waking up to the time we go to sleep saying prayers to reading books that come home from the book in the bag. It's literally through every step of the day, which goes through every step of the week and through our life. So Valley Christian, thank you very much. The staff, the support, thank you so much. This truly is a celebration and a testimony to what we're trying to do for our own family. We're able to have that in our school and also within the community as well. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks so much, Jayton, for sharing that perspective as a parent. What a privilege it is to work together with you parents, and just hearing from you, thank you, Jayton. At this time, our 5th grade students are going to come up and sing under the direction of Mrs. Molly Reimer. So 5th grade choir, come on up.
It's clear
fantastic job by those fifth graders. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce my good friend, Dan Egler, as our Faith Challenge speaker. Dan grew up on a small island in Lake Victoria, Tanzania, East Africa, where his dad worked as an island evangelist with the various tribes who lived on the islands there on Lake Victoria. Dan attended Victoria Primary School, I'm sure not many have heard of that, for his elementary years, and then went on to Rift Valley Academy in Kenya during his junior high and early high school years. Incidentally, that is where Mona, my wife, and I attended when we went to high school. Dan became one of my best friends as we played soccer together. Not to mention we had some tough ping pong matches and also enjoyed some challenging rook games together. Following high school, Dan received his bachelor's degree at the King's College in New York, a master's degree from Washington State University, and a doctorate in administration and instructional leadership from the University of Alabama. For 13 years, Dan served as a teacher, soccer coach, high school principal, and director of the Alliance Academy, a well-known school for missionary kids in Quito, Ecuador. He returned stateside in 1999 and has worked in a variety of roles with the Association of Christian Schools International, ACSI, in their global division. In 2013, Dan assumed the role as the president of ACSI. ACSI serves 3,000 member Christian schools, one of which is Valley Christian. Here in the U.S., 24,000 Christian schools worldwide, and more than 5.5 million students. As a little side note here, you all know that Valley is currently going through accreditation with ACSI and Advanced Ed. And we will actually have a team here in less than 2 weeks to check us out and help us become a stronger school. Dan is the author of Mentoring Millennials, Shaping the Next Generation. He and his wife Kathy have 4 grown children, Andrew, Danielle, Matthew, and Bethany, and they live in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Dan is a servant leader and he's passionate for Christian education. And I know that you'll pick up on that tonight as he shares with us. Please welcome Dan Egler.
So I want to talk a little bit this morning, or this evening. It's morning somewhere in the world, but this evening here, a little bit about the value proposition of sending your kids to a Christian school. You see, I really believe that we are entering into what David Kinnaman of Barna Group says is the Babylonian period. And we need Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's to run toward the mess and make a difference in the American culture. There's nothing new under the sun. 2,000 years ago, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego embedded themselves in a totally godless society and made a phenomenal difference. I think Christian schools are poised at a critical moment in our history to do that as well. A number of years ago, I was asked to write a scholarly paper or present a scholarly paper for review at a conference in Dusseldorf, Germany. It was really interesting because there was a segment of the conference being set aside for spiritual formation. It was a totally secular conference, and I thought, this is interesting. I wonder if they would accept a paper, a scholarly paper written from a biblical perspective. So I didn't just present one, I sent 2 in, fully expecting to be rejected, and I didn't want to hear anybody from a Christ-centered perspective. Lo and behold, came back, and they were both accepted. So I'm flying to Dusseldorf, Germany. It was an international conference for not Christian education, for education. I was expecting probably about 75 people, but lo and behold, there were 1,000 there from all over the world, representing the International Baccalaureate, the American AP, and international education. And needless to say, I was kind of an outsider. But when I made my presentations, I presented them from a biblical perspective, but I didn't cite the biblical passages, just the biblical principles. And they had one leader that was going around listening to all the sessions, and then he was going to make a summative presentation of what he'd heard. It was interesting when I listened to some of the sessions because there was a stark difference in the perspective, a worldview. Most of these educators viewed the education as the salvation of society and culture. But if you wrap religion into it, that was the problem with the world today. You see, the bottom line, they believed that every human being was born good, and all you needed to do was to educate them. Whereas we believe we're born with a sin nature and in need of redemption. Right from the very beginning, that premise takes you on two different paths. So I'll never forget listening to the closing session. He went through his 5 top presentations. 5, 4, 3, 2, number 1. It was a presentation that I gave. And he talked about the story that I'm going to share with you. It's a story of my elementary teacher. You see, as Dave mentioned, I went to this little one-room schoolhouse in a corner of Africa you cannot even find on a map. And there was 13 kids in the classroom. You got the picture up there. 7 different nationalities. They're all white. But 13 kids, 7 nationalities. If you walk into my office in Colorado Springs, you'll see the same picture over the light switch when I flip on the light. And every day I look at it because I want to remember. I want to remember the power of a Christian education. I had the same teacher for all 5 grades. It was a one-room schoolhouse. No running water, no electricity, no telephone, no mail, no internet, of course. By world standards, it was a pretty pitiful education. But I got an Ivy League education in a corner of Africa you can't even find. Because of the power of a teacher. She fanned the flame of learning and the love of learning that stood the test of time all the way through my academic career. She taught in that little one-room schoolhouse for 30 years. She never got married. She never saved up a whole lot in her 401k. She never got Teacher of the Year. Nobody knew who she was. Can you imagine what those dark African nights were like? With just a kerosene lamp burning and the cicadas singing in the trees and American Thanksgiving rolls around and she's alone. And what it was like at Christmas time and she's alone. As a kid, I took it for granted, but as an adult, I know that she must have been asking God, why? Why me? Can somebody else do this? 30 years. I was after my sophomore year of college. I was a soccer player. I was pretty successful at the time. People were whispering in my ear, son, you got the gifts. You can play professionally. You'll have a platform proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ. All absolutely true. What they didn't know was that deep in my heart, I had made a silent vow. There was no way I was going to make the mistake my dad had made, or my elementary teacher. Get stuck in a corner of Africa and nobody knew who I was. I was going to make a name for myself. And I was full of this selfish ambition. That kind of talk just fanned the flame of selfish ambition. It was right after the soccer season was over. We're heading into Christmas break. My dad said, hey, we've got somebody here. You have 2 hours from the campus staying with us, and she would like to eat lunch with you. I said, who is it? Because you won't believe it. It's your elementary school teacher. I go, what? So yeah, she's driven 3 days from Florida. She's staying with us, and she would like to have lunch with you. I tried to weasel my way out of it, but there's no way I could get off the hook. So I got to the back of the cafeteria, remembered her just like she was. A little bit older, but sure had the spunk. And I had a life-changing meal. She had a little black book that had listed all 13 of my classmates in there. Some older, some younger, shared what they were doing with their lives and had this very curious phrase at the end. She was asking every of my classmates how they were living their life in light of eternity. How do you define the good life? Well, she asked me that question. I was full of shame. I couldn't answer. I could never lie to the lady. And there's this awkward, painful silence. I never answered the question. I walked her to her car, said goodbye, and I never saw her again. I could see the pain in her eyes because I was one of her best and brightest, and she knew what my answer was. You know what? 2 years later, she entered into heaven. Nobody here knows who she is. I also found out she was crisscrossing the United States and Canada to try to touch base with as many of her former pupils as she could to ask them that question, to cement her legacy. And when we get to heaven, you're going to see this long line of missionary kids spanning 30 years to wrap their arms around this lady and to say, thank you. It was worth it. Thank you. That's the power of Christian education. That's what's worth the value proposition. Bill Brown, the past president of Cedarville University, says that one person committed to a cause is much better than 1,000 that are only interested. So we often focus on size, but it's more the commitment to the cause. To follow up on this story, one year in Quito, Ecuador, as the high school principal, I was speaking to all the students, and we had about 250 kids in high school. And I told them that story about my elementary school principal, and I said, listen, this year, I want you focusing on how are you going to live your life in light of eternity? Just like she challenged me. We had an English teacher that took a risk in our pretty conservative community, but got permission from the parents and showed a movie entitled The Dead Poets Society. I know many of you have seen it, but it's about an English teacher in an old New England male boarding school, and they're reading poetry. But one of the phrases in the movie is this English teacher talking to his young men and saying, listen, boys, someday you're only going to be food for worms, so carpe diem. Carpe diem. Seize the day. Seize the day. So the English teacher asked, it was AP English, asked his students, the top 10 kids, listen, how do you think about that Christianly? You know what? We spend a lot of our times bemoaning past mistakes, and we lose on today. Or we spend a lot of our time with our hopes and aspirations for the future, and we lose out on today. There's some truth to that. How do you think about that Christianly? Well, those kids argued, they wrestled, they spent a week over it, went home and talked about it at dinner time, and what they came up with was carpe aeternitatem. Seize eternity. Why settle for just a day? Put it on t-shirts every Thursday, every week. Wore those t-shirts to remind the kids that year, hey, we're about living in light of eternity. Carpe aeternitatem. 5 years later, I'm speaking in Budapest, Hungary. Christian educators from Europe and West Africa are there. And there's a couple there from Hillcrest School in Jos, Nigeria, Old Guard Missionary School. They'd gone through the school, had gotten expelled, both of them as a couple, gone back to the United States, got their lives turned around, got their college degrees, fell in love and got married, went back to the school as boarding parents. And then he moved into the classroom and was teaching Bible. And they were at this conference. I didn't know who they were, didn't meet them. And I told this carpe aeternitatem story, and it gripped the husband. He went back to Jos, Nigeria as the Bible teacher, and he turned his classroom into the carpe aeternitatem classroom. He became known as the carpe guy. At the age of 51. He had cancer, went back to the United States, was undergoing chemotherapy, and he was driving down the highway in Florida. He had a brain aneurysm that killed him instantly. Left his wife a widow with 3 daughters. She moved back to the United States to finish up her college degree, was attending a university in Indiana. 5 years later, I was speaking in Indianapolis. I see this lady coming forward after I'm done, and I can see it a mile away. She was carrying an African bag. I go, boy, that's kind of unusual. And she goes, you don't know me, but I want to show you a picture. And she pulled out a picture, and it was her husband's headstone. Do you see what's written on there? Stephen George Beecham, carpe aeternitatem. Seize eternity, why settle for a day? He was buried in the town that he was born in, Miango, Nigeria, and that's what his headstone was. You see, from the life of an English teacher that taught his kids to think Christianly, the story took a life of its own. Their yearbook is now called Carpe Eternitatem. And oh, by the way, that widow finished her bachelor's degree and went back to Jos, Nigeria, and replaced her husband as the Bible teacher there. Can you imagine the heroes of the faith? You see, a Christian education needs to be about cleaning the student lenses and how they view the world. But in order to gauge the world of ideas, Christian schools also need a commitment to excellence. If anything is done in the name of Jesus, we need to have the mark of excellence. So that's what happened in my elementary school. Remember when I said we got an Ivy League education? If the name of Jesus is going to be attached to it, nothing but excellence. Mediocrity is unacceptable. This book, Piety and Philosophy, a primer for Christian schools, talks about that. That if you have the name school in your name, you either be about excellence or remove the word Christian or the word school from your name, because the name of Jesus shouldn't be tarnished with mediocrity. But see, we need to go beyond being schools of academic excellence and be intentional about the spiritual formation of students. That is the clarion call that sets us apart. Kids today need to be countercultural because they have a siren song, particularly in our culture and a lot of first world countries. The siren song of the primacy of comfort and wealth defines what the meaning of the good life is. But that's just short-sighted thinking. You see, there's a shared journey when you're involved in discipleship and spiritual formation. John Westerhoff, in a classic book, Will Our Children Have Faith?, posits that the only way a child can grow in spiritual maturity is within a community of faith. And the community of faith should view spiritual formation as a pilgrimage where the teacher and learner are engaged in the process of growing spiritually in a shared journey over time. This is really key because there's a metaphor. This metaphor is different than the metaphor of a production line where educators do things to students to aid in their growth. Or the metaphor of a greenhouse where teachers do things for students to help them grow spiritually. The shared pilgrimage metaphor is one in which teachers do things with students to help them grow spiritually. This encompasses vulnerability in the establishment of an authentic community of faith. Seeing all the alumni here, it appears to me as an outsider looking in that you've got some healthy roots here for a community of faith that truly can nurture the spiritual formation of young people in today's culture. Christine Poles, a Christian ethicist, has done a lot of research on communities of faith in churches, schools, and she has 4 helpful conceptual hooks to help outline what a healthy community of faith would look like. And I would posit that every healthy Christian school has these 4 elements in there, that they can be identified. Hospitality, gratitude, truth-telling, and promise-keeping. I'm just going to highlight the first 2. The first one is hospitality. There's 2 pictures up there. The first one on your left, you probably don't recognize, but he's here today. You see, when I was in the 6th grade, I had to travel for 3 days to get to my school. Can you imagine that? I took a boat from an island in Lake Victoria to the mainland. Then I took a steamer up the coast of Lake Victoria. That took another day. Then I got an overnight train all the way across Kenya up to the high escarpment of the Great Rift Valley, a little town called Kijabi. It was a steam engine train, so I actually jumped off a moving train. It was just crawling. They didn't want to stop. So we would throw our luggage and thought it was a great adventure and get off. You see, I was going to a boarding school, Rift Valley Academy, for the first time. I didn't know a single adult. I didn't know a single kid. 6th grade. I was small, skinny, from another country. I didn't know anybody. I was petrified because I'd heard this rumor of these combination locks. I'd never seen one. And how on earth am I going to figure out how to open this when I don't know anybody? I'm going to look stupid. A miracle happened. A modern day miracle. Because you know what it's like in the 6th grade. You got the cool kid and you got the kid that's the least of these. Well, I was the least of these at the bottom of the barrel. The most popular kid, the best athlete. His dad was the principal. Everybody wanted to be his friend. For some reason, he reached out and befriended me. The least of these. That's the biblical concept of hospitality and shalom. To identify somebody and to reach out to them. God knew at that moment that I needed a friend desperately. And he tapped a young man on his shoulder that had the gift of hospitality and was a Christ follower to be countercultural to sixth grade culture and reach across and befriend the least of these. And that was David Entwistle. That's why when he asks me to speak, I clear my calendar because I have a debt to pay. And that's the truth. And we didn't know then as little boys the importance of that. I shared some of that last night with Ian and Mona, how critical that was at that moment in my life. But hospitality. And that can be embedded in the culture of a school. You see it as a parent. You can smell it, you can feel it. It's something that's different when you step on a campus that is just imbued with hospitality. I also coach soccer at Colorado Springs Christian School. That's a large school in Colorado Springs. All 4 of my kids graduated from that school, but my third son, Matthew, was on a very successful, highly ranked soccer team. And they have this weird tradition in Colorado Springs when they get into the state playoffs. They dye their hair. Everybody dyes their hair. And so we were in the state playoffs, but we had one exchange student from Korea. And he refused to dye his hair because he knew his dad was coming all the way from Korea to watch him play, and it would not look good if he did that. So we gave him a reprieve on that, or the rest of the kids. But he came in the 9th grade, could hardly speak any English. And by the time he was a senior, he was embraced by these American kids. I'll never forget, I had an assistant coach one day during the early preseason workouts, and he could not figure out these 2 Korean kids. He couldn't tell them apart. And finally, one of the kids comes running up to him and says, "Hey, listen, that kid is Yoonhan, and he wears Adidas, and that's June Searle, and he wears Nike, all right? Can you figure it out now?" So anyway, this was Yoonhan. We went all the way through. We got upset in the semifinals of the state championship. The boys were crushed, but we had a season-ending banquet. And I decided that I was going to try to demonstrate hospitality. So one of my colleagues was traveling to Korea, and I don't know what football team you guys follow here, but we were the Denver Broncos, you know. So you can imagine getting a Peyton Manning jersey. It would be a big deal, okay? Well, he went to Korea and he bought Korean national team jerseys with the numbers of all the seniors emblazoned on the back. And at the banquet, I called Yoonhan up first, and I pulled out of my bag a Korean national team jersey with his number on it, and he just about collapsed. It was a big deal. I called him up, and I said, "Yoonhan, we want to honor you as the guest in our country. You've become one of us, and today we honor you." And he gets a standing ovation. Gave him a Korean national team jersey. Every senior on that team got one because I wanted them to have this memory of biblical hospitality, embracing somebody different than them. The next day, my son Matthew's going to school. He's wearing his Korean national team jersey. I go, "Matthew, what are you doing?" He goes, "All of us seniors are wearing them. It's a secret. Because we know that Yoonhan's wearing his tomorrow, or today. And he thinks he's going to be by himself, but we're all wearing it." Sure enough, there they are in the hallway. It's a cell phone picture. They took a snapshot of all of them honoring him wearing their Korean national team jerseys. Hospitality, shalom, embracing somebody is made in the image of God that has value. The next one is gratitude. It's a key plank in a community of faith. And you know what, in our culture, I see it every time I come back from overseas. It's not just us, it's other first world countries too. But the importance we put on comfort and wealth. It's like a frog in boiling water. We hardly notice it. That more. Our needs, our wants become needs, and it just grows and grows and grows, and our kids are wrapped up in that. I have a good friend, Mike Zigarelli, that did his research in the area of business, and he was looking at business ethics and morals. And so he put together the attributes of mature Christians out of Colossians 3 and the attributes or the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5, and developed an online survey where Christians could take a self-analysis of where they were in their walk with God. 35,000 respondents from all over the world, and he crunched the numbers to see if there was a differentiator between those that felt that they were still immature and growing in their knowledge of God to those that felt that they really had some spiritual maturity. And there were 3 key variables that differentiated between immature and mature. The one was so important that you had to have it. It was a pathway virtue for spiritual maturity, and it was a heart of gratitude. Now, I want you to think about that. I don't know if your kids are like my kids, but the siren song of our culture does not preach gratitude. As a matter of fact, our economic engine would grind to a halt if we were grateful and content. The siren song teaches the opposite. But if it's a pathway virtue, wow, we got a lot of work to do, ourselves and our kids. I go to some of the most remote countries, and I see gratitude. We could well learn. One of the schools that I went to was a country called Kazakhstan, right on the edge of China, Eastern Europe. 250 missionary kids. They all knew what the grass was like on the other side. It was an old, decaying Soviet building. And I went in, and the soccer field was the size, or the athletic field was the size of this platform with not a blade of grass and just barbed wire around it. The library was a portable building. And one of the things I typically do when I would go into some of these schools is ask the principal to handpick the 6 top school leaders. You know, who do kids look up to in the school? And I want to interview them. And I usually ask them questions, and then on that, I give them a 3x5 card, and the last thing I do, I've got this anecdotal data bank over 20 years. I'll ask them to grade their school. And once they grade their school, I want them to turn it around, and just like a teacher, I said, I want you to give me a justification for the grade that you gave. Kids are pretty honest. It's remarkable. Well, this particular school with pitiful facilities, snow piled high, bitterly cold, sun never came out the whole week I was there, where kids knew what it was like back in Australia or the UK or the United States or Canada. They were there with their families, their missionary parents. They gave that school straight A's. When I turned over the card and read why, I couldn't help but weep. It oozed with gratitude. I'm so thankful that I get to see my folks making a difference. I'm so thankful for teachers that would come all the way to Almaty to teach us. I'm so thankful for my classmates that lift me up in my faith. I told that principal, I got to see those kids again. They came in wringing their hands thinking they were in trouble. I said, listen, you guys are so far ahead. Don't ever lose what just comes naturally to you, because it's a parent virtue, a heart of gratitude. That's the value proposition of a Christian education. They're not going to learn that in the culture around them. But in a community like this, it'll stand the test of time, and it's an investment in the eternal. That's worth anything. It's priceless. How do we teach transformed students? By embracing and engaging in the world of ideas, establishing communities of faith that are intentional about joining students in their spiritual pilgrimage. So my prayer, this was written by a former Christian Missionary Alliance ministry that's now in eternity, and he had the following prayer in his journal. I'll never forget it at the funeral. My prayer is that this community would preach with eternity in your heart, that this community would teach with eternity on your mind, that this community would walk with eternity in your feet, and that this community would speak with eternity on your tongue. Carpe eternitatem. sees eternity. Why settle for just a day? God bless you all.